Welcome to this week's episode of the Jungle Juice podcast. I'm Sam Gormley. He's Mick Nelson. Mick, are you seasick?
Just a little bit. Yeah. I was telling Sam before the show. So I was just on like a week-long cruise, and I didn't know about this feeling that some people get, like where you feel like you're still on a cruise ship after you're off the boat. So like, I'm definitely still feeling that. It's been like 4 days, so hopefully it goes away soon. Other than that, good cruise, good time.
Where did you go?
So we had stops in San Juan, Puerto Rico,
Okay.
then Puerto Plata, in the Dominican, and then Grand Turk, just their cruise port over there. I love Grand Turk because they had a Margaritaville, and I love Margaritaville.
Like Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville?
Yes, as in there was Jimmy Buffett merch everywhere.
Well, isn't there one opening on the levee?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So there
Can't
you
wait
go.
for that one either.
See, you won't even have to go to Turks and Caicos, I guess. You'll just be able to walk down to Newport on the levee, which is a short 5-minute drive for you. So that's going to be dangerous, probably for your wallet.
I told Sam, my wife Sam, not you,
not your sister,
and not my sister Sammy. We're going to try to get a room opening night of Margaritaville in Newport.
Oh wow,
that is my that's my number one goal in life now. Like, just to let you guys know, I know you guys probably don't care, but I did pass the CPA a couple of weeks ago, so that was my number one goal. Thank you. Don't have to take a test ever again.
I don't have clapping sound effects. I was going to play this, but this is not the one that you deserve. You don't deserve that at all. You need the opposite of that.
It's a life. It's gonna be a life of misery now that I am a CPA now. No, it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be fine. I don't know. It's a good accomplishment. But now my number one goal is all right, Riley, I got you. I'll get you. I'm not giving out tax. I know Riley personally. So anybody else that sees this and is like, oh, hey, Mick's just handing out tax services for free. I don't do that. So anyways, so yeah, my new number one goal.
You're going to have to sponsor this show if you want to start, like, get some sponsorship money into this. If you want to start sponsoring or, giving out advertising information on your tax services here. My goodness.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll pay up. Anyways, yeah, my new number one goal in life is to be at the opening night of Margaritaville in Newport and to get a room there and to drink a lot of margaritas because I love margaritas. They're a great time. Who doesn't like? Do you like margaritas?
Oh yeah. I mean, listen. And are you a salt or a sugar guy?
Salt rim. And then I can do frozen or on the rocks.
Okay.
I probably prefer on the rocks. Frozen. I get brain freeze really easily now for some reason. So, yeah, salt rim on the rocks.
I'll be honest. When we were talking before the show and going through, what are we going to talk about today? I didn't have margaritas in the first 4 minutes of the show. But hey, if only we had one right now. But I guess
margaritas right now. I mean, Mark, do you like margaritas?
He doesn't drink. Remember?
Oh yeah,
Mark doesn't drink.
Have you? Oh yeah, Mark does not drink.
Virgin margarita.
What about virgin margarita? Yeah. What about just margarita? You know what Sammy, my sister, would
Isn't
drink?
that just like an icy though? If we're being honest.
Pretty much. No. So Sammy, like when she was in her sugar crazed phase of like her, whenever she was in middle school or whatever, she would just drink margarita mix. That was so sugary.
Pure sugar.
And I love me some sugar too. Like I love sugary things.
You do. Non-alcoholic tequila truly isn't that bad. Just pricey, he says. Interesting. I've never had the non-alcoholic tequila. But still, so that's great. I'm sure that we can pound margaritas at the first tailgate, which we're going to come back to the post that we made earlier this week about how Mick and I apparently are going to dress for the first tailgate. We're also going to wear backless suits.
Yes.
Like Joe Burrow. We'll come back to that in just a few minutes. But Mick, we are officially Keaton Sutherland days away from the Bengals 2024 kickoff. Or would you rather me go Dennis Rowland, Max Sharping,
Dude,
Jake
so
Fisher,
when you
Fred
said
Johnson?
when you said Keaton Sutherland, for some reason my mind thought of Kiefer Sutherland. I think that's his name, the guy from
Yes.
24. So I was like,
Uh-huh.
wait a minute, we're not. I thought you were going to say we're 24 days away from training camp. Which are we?
No, maybe a
Close,
little bit more than that.
close.
Close.
Probably a solid 30. It's probably a solid 30 days. But yeah, that's
But really, we're Rich Bram days away from kickoff. 74 days. Listen,
Dennis
there's
Rowland
nobody else
days.
that we just. Yeah, I mentioned Dennis Rowland, Fred Johnson, Jake Fisher, Bengals legends, dropping it in there for 74 days until kickoff. Coming up on the show today, we are going to dump into, since we haven't had a show in the last 2 weeks, shockingly, it's funny, Mick. It was like there's been no news really all summer except these little tidbits. And then you get on a boat and it's like there was actually news for us to talk about. We're going to dive into that. And then we are also going to talk a little bit about fantasy football. Since we're both fantasy football nerds, we're going to dive a little bit into who do we think as far as what rookies we're looking at, quarterbacks, who is our must get, and so on when it comes into that. So that's how we'll wrap up the show for today. But we invite you to follow us on our social media channels. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We're also on YouTube. You can subscribe to us there. We're also on your favorite podcasting platform as Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, all of those for that. But first off, let's jump through some of the news that we've had since last time we talked, Mick. The first news came literally the morning after our last show. And usually the morning after is not really a good thing, but in this case it was. Ted Karras signed a 1-year contract extension with the Cincinnati Bengals. I think one of us predicted this a couple of weeks ago. I don't remember which one of us it was, but I think
it was not me. It would have been
okay,
you.
so it might have been me. And I think this is a smart move, an expected move, and one that, if we're being honest, we're both big Matt Lee guys, but Matt Lee still was a 7th-round pick. It's probably a needed move.
Yeah. So Ted Karras, one off the field has been kind of the face of the franchise. It's not Joe Burrow, I think, or maybe Jamar Chase. At this point, he's done great things for the community with his foundation, and what he's been doing off the field for the team is it can't be understated what he's done. So from that perspective, I'm really happy that we get him for it's a 1-year extension, right?
Correct. So
we get him 2 more years. And yeah, I mean, I think I didn't really expect them to do this just because I've mentioned on previous shows that the Bengals typically like to go younger at positions. They don't like to sign people to a 3rd contract. There's a lot of buyer's remorse that they had with the Geno and the Carlos, their 2nd extensions. I think that kind of lingered around the front office for the most part. But yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of this move. Ted's been a very solid center across the league, pretty much his entire career. He hasn't been, one of the best centers in the league, but he's constantly been, I would say top half in the league.
He's consistent.
And considering that we haven't had like a really good center since
Rich Bram,
dare I say Kyle Cook too. I mean, I didn't think Kyle Cook was too bad when he was here, but really from the Bodine days onward, we haven't had great center play until, or even good center play until Ted Karras came here.
Are you really saying that the Detroit Lions game a couple of years ago didn't have great center play?
Wait, what?
Trey Hill, when he started his one game against the Lions a couple of years ago.
Did he start that game? I didn't know he started that.
I'm almost positive he did. There was a game a couple of years ago that Trey Hill started, and I think it was
Trey Hopkins, I thought.
I think it was Trey Hill that started that one game.
Really?
I think he started one game in his career, and I think it was that Lions game. But still, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. It's a good move, and I think, you mentioned hanging out at a Margaritaville. Is there a guy on the Bengals you do want to hang out at a Margaritaville more with than Ted Karras?
Probably not.
No.
That sounds like a great time.
Like, if we're being honest, it'd be fun to hang out with Joe Burrow, but would it really?
I think it'd be fun. I don't think it's there's a difference between having fun with somebody and having fun with somebody and drinking with them.
Yeah,
So
because
I
I
don't.
feel like you'd want to go to Ruby's with Joe Burrow, or something, a
I would go to
steakhouse.
I would love to go to like a rap concert with Joe. Like going to a Kid
Okay.
Cudi concert with Burrow would probably be
Mhm.
really fun. But going to a bar with Joe Burrow, I mean, I think it'd be good, but probably not as great as it would be with Ted. I mean, that
Oh
would
yeah.
be
I-
Ted or even like Logan Wilson or
Oh, and you better believe, like Ted Karras can put it down. You better believe he can. How many margaritas he could destroy and still be able to drive home that night? I'd guarantee it'd be quite a few.
yeah,
It'd be quite a few.
Ted. If you ever watch this, which odds of that aren't great, uh, Ted, if you ever watch this, just know that we would love to have margaritas with you sometime in the future. The
Listen,
big boys would be lit. Yes, we would.
and listen, Mick might even share his room at the Margaritaville Hotel night one with you if
Yeah,
you want.
I'll give you the bed. I'll sleep on the freaking couch sofa. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you never know. He might be able to get you in there. The other big news, which I think was, at least to me, a little bit of a surprise, Tee Higgins signed the franchise tag. Now, for me, it wasn't a surprise. It was a surprise at the timing. I think we both expected this to happen in about 2 months, like mid to late August. But the fact that he did it, 10 days ago or so, that kind of surprised me that he did it and just got it out of the way.
Yeah, and I think this is probably T driving this too. I think maybe unlike the Jesse situation, one that I think Jesse, he was franchise tagged once. Actually, I mean it's pretty much the same situation, I guess. But yeah, I think that I don't think David Mulligetta was just like, hey, you better just sign this and get this out of the way, considering he did not do that with Jesse and give him the advice to do that. So I think T probably drove this discussion. He probably wanted to be back with his offense, with his boys, with Jamar, with Joe, and getting back in the swing of things. And then also, I mean, it sounds like there's going to be some new wrinkles to this offense. You do have a new offensive coordinator in Dan Pitcher. In Brian Callahan's not there, so there's going to be at least a little bit of change. You mentioned on a previous show that there's been there's been hints of more eye candy, so more pre-snap motion, which I think would be a big change from what this offense has done. So I think it's good to get T back in, so they can get this offense rolling.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's a good sign. Because here's the biggest thing with this is that if Tee Higgins decides, hey, I'm going to hold out in training camp and not show up, Bengals theoretically now have the ability to fine him, which means that he actually has a reason to be there, that he's not going to be costing himself money. Because prior to, when it comes into those mandatory minicamps, since he wasn't technically under contract, he was, but he wasn't, the Bengals had no room to fine him when it comes to that. Now, are the Bengals going to start fining him? I don't think so. But still, they do have that ability. But I think as a whole, it's a good sign that we can take this and put it behind. Because, I mean, now you're hoping does the big three get really their first training camp ever together?
Yeah.
And that could be huge.
Yeah. No, I think it is huge. And then also having Jermaine Burton in there too. I mean, you have a third wide receiver, I guess, too, that you had the same continuity the past 3 seasons, right? With Jamar, Tyler, and T. You have a third wide receiver, whether that's going to be Yoshi, whether that's going to be Jermaine Burton, whether it's going to be Charlie Jones, and so forth. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of change in this wide receiver. There has been a little bit of change in this wide receiver room, and I think getting there earlier is crucial.
And then I'm fascinated too, as you mentioned Yoshi and Charlie Jones. I mean, especially Charlie Jones, but how much time did Burrow really even get with those guys healthy? I mean, Charlie Jones, he might have had 1 day of practice with him healthy because, Burrow had the calf injury, sat out, and then Charlie Jones got hurt. I think it was in the Ravens game, wasn't it, that he had the big punt return, and then I think he got hurt. And by the time he came back, I don't believe there was any overlap with him and Burrow. If it was maybe 1 game or something along the lines of that. It wasn't anything drastic. And then Yoshi, you got to think that he really didn't have much time with Burrow anyway. So this is going to be huge for that wide receiver. Is it 5 guys? Is it 6 guys? Depending on how you want to do it, how they can truly mesh with Burrow, and I think it really helps a lot to have Tee Higgins in there as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Other big news, this one intrigues me a lot, and I wish I pulled the theme songs. We're talking about just pure theme songs of a TV show. I don't know that there's much better than Hard Knocks. Just a great theme. It makes you want to run through a brick wall every single time you hear it. They announced that Hard Knocks in season this year will be the AFC North. All 4 teams on it throughout the month of December. This is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a good route for all parties involved. I mean, so from the viewer standpoint, you don't get to watch one locker room for an entire season. You get to watch 4 locker rooms for an entire season. And then I don't know if you watched the past 2 in-season Hard Knocks. I think it was the Colts and the Cardinals, right? And
the Dolphins, wasn't it?
I think the Colts was the first one. Then it was the Cardinals. I guess the most recent one was the Dolphins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like all 3 of those teams somewhat fizzled out in mid-season. I wonder if, having that much media access from outside media sources maybe had some sort of play with with how their seasons kind of falled out. So having, not what, and also the other 3 teams that are doing it are in your division. They're all going through the same I guess media exposure, or so I think it's good for all parties involved. I think that it's going to be kind of cool to see how the different AFC North locker rooms operate. We get to see that culture that Zach Taylor's instilled on a national stage, which sounds great. So yeah, I'm happy about it. Also, the last 2 times the Bengals were on Hard Knocks, they made it to the playoffs. I guess they didn't win the division in 2012. They made it as a wild card team. I think as the 5th seed, and then in 2009, that was the year where
it was 2013 that they were on Hard Knocks, so they have won the division both times.
It was 2012.
I'm looking at the Hard Knocks website right now. It says 2013.
Is it really? I could have swore it was 2012. Okay, 2013. They won the division that year. Argument proven even more. And then they also won in 2009 after the 2008 Hard Knocks. So yeah, I think it's going to be good, and also a little bit of good omen there with the division wins.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued by it, and I mean, let's look at this too. As I have, so what games will they theoretically be following? Then, I mean, you kick it off with Bengals Steelers. I'm fascinated with how they do the Cowboys with it being an ESPN game. You got them going to Tennessee. In between Tennessee and Cleveland is going to be fascinating as well, because you're going to have, how do you deal with a short week?
Mm-hmm.
I am fascinated by that. And then you've got that Broncos game in there, but I'm really interested with how it'll go about. And also I think it was Paul Dehner Jr. on his podcast, The Growler, they were discussing of, you're going to really get to see a different side of Joe Burrow. What is he like in the locker room? What is he like in meetings? How much access will he be willing to give? Because they made the point, they're not going to follow Joe Burrow around, but who are some of those smaller guys in the Bengals roster that they might pick to follow?
Yoshi.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting that answer could probably change 3 or 4 times. I mean, heck, if Jermaine Burton has a great season, maybe it's him, because he seems like he's a really interesting guy.
Yes, he does.
I'm really interested by how that's going to go about. And I haven't watched Hard Knocks because I don't have HBO, but I'm going to re-up my Max because I'll definitely want to watch that. That, and I've heard everybody tell me I should watch Game of Thrones, so I need to do that.
Dude, there's so much good stuff on HBO. I could give you a list.
It was one of those things. I had it for a little bit, and I got busy, so I ended up canceling it. But right now I'm using my Peacock, and I like Peacock a lot. So it's just, there's so much streaming out there.
Peacock's great. Peacock's also good. We've been watching Top Chef because all the Bravo shows are on there. So Top Chef has been our thing for Peacock. But yeah, Max, what is one of the greatest shows of all time is on Max.
The Wire?
No. Come on, The Wire.
The Sopranos?
Yes.
Oh, see, I've never watched The Sopranos.
There you go. You can watch Sopranos now.
The Wire I was watching, and I got about 2.5 seasons into it, and then that's when I canceled my subscription, and it was really good. So The Wire, though, is regarded as one of the best television shows of all time as well.
It is. Also, don't want to get on the subject of shows too much, but I started watching The Boys this week.
Never seen it.
Oh, it's awesome. It is.
I'm watching Modern Family from start to finish now, and that's
that's also great. Sam loves Modern Family.
Oh yeah, I like shows that I can laugh at and I can binge very easily. It's good with that. Riley says, do you think part of his Joe Burrow's recent opening up could be related to the Hard Knocks? He's becoming significantly more open on his private life recently. I honestly think this has nothing to do with it. This was going to happen whether Joe Burrow wants it or not.
I didn't even know he's been more open with what has he been open about with his private life?
I don't know. I mean, he likes his privacy. That's why I think that it's just going to be, it's not like they're going to follow him to his house and do some of the house interviews that you saw with some of the smaller guys. But they might. Who knows? Maybe this will be.
Figure out what Joe Burrow's relationship life is like for the life of us. Like, we cannot figure it out. Is he engaged? Is he not with Olivia anymore? Like, we can't even figure that out. So I don't.
You know who's not in a relationship anymore? Cody Ford. Cody Ford.
Do you give that sound effect?
Oh, what? Do you want this one? Sad. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Mark's a fan of Cody and TT. Yep. They're done. We talked about that enough last week or 2 weeks ago. I don't really know what else can be said about it. You know what we can talk about though, Mick? Joe Burrow is a model.
Yes, he is. He's been a model. Now he's an official model. Him and Jay Jettas.
I saw the post in Houday Nation, the Facebook group. You know, how dare he do this? He should be focusing on football.
It's June.
Yes. It's like, what do you want him to do? But also, I mean, I respect it because let's be real. Neither one of us could pull off any of those things that he's rocking. No shot. Backless suit. No. We're not doing that.
What do you mean? We're going to pull it off at the week 1 tailgate.
Are we going to? Only if it can be like a tiger stripe suit,
like the Joe Burrow Super Bowl suit.
Yeah. But I want it to be orange and black. Riley. Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
I'll wear those too.
Please no. There are children. There are children at the tailgate, and you're going to scar a small child if you start wearing chaps to a tailgate. I don't think your wife wants you out the door wearing those either. I think she would probably veto you walking out the door in that. I just find it funny, for one, how much people care that Joe Burrow is doing the modeling. But also just like, why do we care? Like, are you happy? Great. Have fun.
Say that their star quarterback's a model.
In Vogue.
Who could do that? Nobody could do that.
Is Patrick okay? Riley says Mick has to wear a striped backless jacket and assless chaps with striped undies. That is an image that no one wanted to have here on a Wednesday evening. There's no question about that. But Patrick Mahomes isn't in vogue.
No.
Is he? No. Lamar Jackson isn't in vogue. No. But I don't know. It's just good job, Joe. Great job. I hope you're having fun. Keep on doing what you're doing. Good job, bud. Right? Isn't that all we need to say?
Yeah.
The Bengals training camp schedule was released. Back Together weekend is July the 28th. So that's one of their first big practices. So that shows you that we're just about a month away from that. That's the one that they typically would bring into Paycor Stadium, but I don't believe it is going to be in there because I think its concerts are going to be hosted there. So I think it might still be out on the regular training lawn. And then if you're a season ticket member, there's a couple of season ticket member only practices, including one on August the 20th, which is a Tuesday. That's the joint practice with the Colts.
Okay.
Are you planning on going to any training camp this year, Mick?
We'll see how work kind of shakes out. But maybe try to make definitely one of the season ticket holder practices, because I don't feel like a lot of people would be at those ones, or you know what I mean. So
since it's ticketed, yeah.
Yeah,
I find it interesting. Training camp, I haven't been in probably. In fact, the last time I probably went to training camp, I don't think it was with you, but I remember it was Jake Fisher's rookie year. So I guess that would have been 2015, right? Or 15. And I remember his, like, the house that he bought and moved into Cincinnati, like, next door was a young family, and he apparently became very close, and that family stood next to us as we watched practice. And I remember that they came over and he was talking to them, and we got to meet Jake Fisher very briefly. So it makes sense. Jake Fisher has gotten more mentions on today's podcast than I'm sure any podcast in the history of.
2 Jake Fisher mentions.
Yes. So since we're Jake Fisher days away from the kickoff, I felt like we had to tell my Jake Fisher story. But training camp, it happens. Remember, if you go, they're limited. I think it's 1,200 people that can get in there. So get there early if you're going to go. It's not ticketed. And I know one of the biggest things is if you're trying to get autographs, good luck. Like, not everyone signs every day. And also, if you're an adult trying to get autographs and you push over a kid, you're the worst.
Here's my thing, is like, my biggest complaint about training camp, in terms of what people have posted about it on the Who Dey Nation group, is like, you'll have like parents bringing their kids there, and they're like, "This isn't accommodating towards kids. It's so hot outside." Blah, blah, blah. You know what? It's the summer. What do you expect? Like, if you're going to bring your kids to training camp, you should fully know that it's going to be really hot and somewhat miserable. So, and there's no shade.
None.
On this field. None whatsoever. There's no trees.
Except on the far side. Like, there's trees around the exterior, but that you're not standing there unless you don't want to watch practice. Like, there's nothing. It's not necessarily... if you're really going to hope to see something, you're going to the wrong thing. Go to a preseason football game. And plus, if you have young kids, take them to a preseason football game. Like, you can get in pretty cheap. You got 2 opportunities to see them, especially, and I know it's a school night for a lot, but that's going to make that game even cheaper. That Thursday, August the 22nd game against the Colts is a perfect one to take your kids to.
Yeah,
I know it's a school night, but there's not going to be a lot of people there. You're probably going to be able to get in dirt cheap. And you're going to have probably a decent amount of player interaction that time as well.
Also, if you hate hanging around with a ton of people, that game's also a great game to go to.
Yes. Because there's going to be nobody there.
That's going to be my favorite game to go to. There's going to be nobody there. It's going to be great.
Yeah, because guess what? I'm probably not going to be there because Grayson County football opens up the night after. Got to be ready for that.
Yeah.
I'll be watching. So, okay, that's most of the news that we had. I don't think we missed anything since you've been gone as far as Bengals news, and really NFL news wise, there's not really been anything going on since we're kind of in the dog days of summer. I know the NBA draft is happening right now. In fact, I meant to check and see. I hadn't gotten an update. Has it started yet?
Is it on ABC?
It is on. Okay, my Reed Shepherd just got taken by the Rockets. Okay,
Is it on ABC? What is it on?
Or ESPN probably. So the researcher, or however you say it, the guy from France went number 1. Alex Sarr went 2. Reed Shepherd 3. The Spurs, their pick is in. I was really hoping Reed Shepherd went to the Spurs, but Houston sounds like it's a decent enough spot for him. But okay, that's enough NBA talk for today. Let's talk a little fantasy football, Mick.
All right, yeah, let's do it.
We're both fantasy football fans. We both have our own level of success when it comes to that. I know for me, I am pretty much boom or bust when it comes to fantasy football. I'm either in the championship or I'm awful. Like, it's rare that I'm a 500 team. And I know we've been in leagues together over the years. I'm not sure if we'll be in one this year or not. I know we had talked about potentially starting one with some people that we know. But to me, it'll be very interesting with some of the questions that we can ask when it comes to fantasy. And the first one I wanted to touch on for us, Mick, is as far as rookies. What rookies are you really going to be looking at NFL wide as far as fantasy football guys that you're really hoping to potentially draft?
Ooh, rookies. So that's a really good question.
Let's start with the first overall pick, Caleb Williams. How do you rate him?
So Caleb Williams, I think will be a decent fantasy quarterback. We've seen the talent that he's shown at USC. We see the wide receiver group that he has, which is probably one of the best wide receiver trios ever for a starting rookie quarterback with Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. Like that might be the best wide receiver trio in the league now. So yeah, he's got a great supporting cast. His defense is pretty bad, which means he should be on the field throwing the ball quite a bit. So yeah, I think Caleb Williams will be a good fantasy quarterback. Right now, I think he's ranked somewhere in the 10 to 15 range out of all quarterbacks. So I think that's
accurate.
Yeah, I think it's a good spot for him. I think he would be a good value pick.
To me, the most interesting one by far, and it's a guy that I know you're not necessarily a fan of, and it's Jaden Daniels.
Yeah.
Because he's one of those guys that if he comes in and he is even decent in the NFL, he'll be a great fantasy football quarterback because he has his legs.
Yeah, so he does have the leg talent. I do agree, but there are big red flags. So the big one is Washington's offensive line, which I think is probably it's definitely a bottom 10 offensive line, if not a bottom 5 offensive line in the league. The biggest critique with Jaden Daniels coming into the draft was his ability to operate under pressure. The guy took a huge, he took a very high sack rate in his time at LSU. His wide receiver group isn't that great either. You have Jahan Dotson, who was in a sophomore slump last year. Terry McLaurin, who's solid. He's good. He's a good wide receiver. Your tight end's Ben Sinnott. He's another rookie. We don't know how he's going to pan out in the league. And then, the backs. You do have Austin Eckler, I guess, who could be a good receiving back. But yeah, there's a lot of red flags where I would probably let somebody else draft Jaden Daniels this year.
To me, Jaden Daniels, if he's your backup, like you're probably feeling pretty decent. Like he'd be a guy that I could match up with if because I always like with my backup quarterback, if I can, is to try and match it up as close as I can to when my starter is so like Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow is my starting quarterback in fantasy, which probably is not going to be the case. What the Bengals bye week is week 11 or 12 or whatever it is. It is week 12. I would probably try to find a quarterback who is going to play week 12 against a weaker defense. And that would probably try to be my goal as far as to who I'd want, because my hope is that my starter would start the rest of the games and this guy would be my 1 week. And Jaden Daniels very well could be a guy like that, to where he can be a spot starter, get a couple of them. Or like last year, I don't remember who I drafted as my main quarterback, but Anthony Richardson was my backup. And I think I took him very late. And it ended up, falling apart. But for a couple of weeks, I had one of the best backup quarterbacks. I had the Jake Browning of backup quarterbacks in fantasy. And it was a really good thing to have, because if it would have kept, it could have been a trade piece for me. So I'm fascinated by how Jaden Daniels is. Is he Anthony Richardson? Or is he... I don't even know the other side of it, what it could be as far as a fantasy. Or is he Anthony Richardson for the last 10 games of the season, where he's non-existent? So I don't really know. I think it'll be very interesting. The wide receivers, though, I think for rookies are fascinating because there are a ton of them.
Yes.
And to me, I mean, you look at it, let's go with number 1. You got Marvin Harrison. I think he's going to be overdrafted by some people. Because of the hype. And I don't know that he's going to be a guy that I'm going to jump on.
Yeah, I'm probably going to avoid Marvin Harrison Jr. One, the Cardinals' offense as a whole isn't that great, but their defense is also not that great either. So I think there's a good chance that they're on the field quite a bit. I think he's going to be like an AJ Green level wide receiver where, um, I think he's going to give you a steady, reliable stat line almost every week, kind of like a Mike Evans too, I guess is a good way to put it. But for top 10, right now he's ranked number 10 amongst fantasy wide receivers. I'm just not I'm not as sold on it, I guess. If he was in more of the 15 to 20 range, I'd be pretty happy about it, but I think he's going to get overdrafted like you just said.
But for me, I mean, you got a guy like Odunze. It's a fascinating case because your pick of Odunze is putting also faith in Caleb Williams.
Yes. And also, the one issue with the Odunze, I think, is just how crowded that wide receiver room is.
And that was my exact next point.
So
go ahead. No, finish your point.
I don't know. I lost it already. Go ahead.
But I think let's go to some of that. To me, you've got the tier that everyone knows, but that next tier down, there's a couple of names that I think are very interesting as far as guys that I'm kind of keeping an eye on later rounds, maybe as a backup or your wide receiver 4 or something like that. That because every good fantasy football player to me has one or two guys on their bench that are almost their wild cards. Where you throw something at the wall, and if it works, you're feeling great, and if not, okay, you release him week 6 and you're fine.
Yeah.
To me, two guys really come to mind for that. And the first one is Xavier Worthy.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by him because early on, I'm immediately thinking he very well could be wide receiver 1 week 1 for the Chiefs. Is it going to be Hollywood Brown? Because Rashee Rice, you don't really know what's going to happen with him for the Chiefs. Now, really wide receiver 1 for the Chiefs is Travis Kelce. But also, we've seen Mahomes work really well with incredibly fast wide receivers. Now, Xavier Worthy is not Tyreek Hill. I fully admit that. But he's going to be, I think, a guy that if he's there at the right time, he'd be I'm drafting you, I'm going to stage you on my bench, and if it comes week 6 and you suck, I can let you go.
Yeah. So Xavier Worthy, I've got some concerns about him. Now I know he has Mahomes as a quarterback, but again, I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1 because Travis Kelce is probably going to have the highest target share out of any of those players, and that's even when Rashee Rice will be on the field. And then also, Hollywood Brown, he's been a solid wide receiver who I think was just dealt with bad quarterback play the past couple of seasons. I think we all forget that the season that Hollywood Brown, the last one he had in Baltimore, I think he was a top 10 fantasy wideout. I think he had a lot of target share for one, and then he absolutely balled out over there. So Xavier Worthy, I'm a little bit low on him. And not just because of Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown. But we talk about comparing him to Tyreek Hill. Now, the average depth of target that he had at Texas wasn't that great. So he's definitely played more like an underneath wide receiver, which is something that doesn't translate to Mahomes' offense as well. And then obviously, he didn't grade too well over at Texas as well. I think he had a mid-70s grade, which was okay for a college wide receiver. So how is that going to translate to the NFL? How much will Mahomes impact his grading and how well he plays? It's a lot of an unknown to me, but I see the intrigue that you guys have with Xavier Worthy.
And see, to me, he is the epitome of the guy that I was mentioning. Of you get him in a late round, and he might be great, but he also might be somebody that is on 3 or 4 teams by the end of the year because everybody's trying to pick him up. In the case that maybe he does something, and Justin brings up another guy that I think we at least have to talk about is Jermaine Burton.
Oh, Burton is my guy.
Yeah, and I agree completely.
Yeah, just one. His tape was so explosive at Alabama that I think that's going to translate really well to the Bengals offense, especially with who they have at quarterback. I mean, Jermaine Burton was doing what he did with Jalen Milroe at quarterback, and no shame on Jalen Milroe. He's a solid college football quarterback, and he could play in the NFL, but he's not Joe Burrow. So you have a guy like Joe Burrow throwing to you. Your average depth of target was tops in the league amongst college wide receivers at Alabama. And then another factor, I'm going to say this quite a bit, but the Bengals defense is not projected to be that great this year. So you'd think the offense is going to have to be on the field, and they're going to be carrying a lot of weight on their shoulders more than they've had to do in prior seasons. So I think Jermaine Burton would be a great late round fantasy pickup. Another name that I really like is Xavier Legette, wide receiver.
That wasn't the one that I was going to guess you were going to go.
Yeah. So I'm kind of buying into the Panthers a little more this season as a whole. I think Dave Canales is a really good offensive play caller and a good culture guy, too, from what I've seen.
And that division is not good.
Yeah, it's not a great division either. So the strength of schedule, so Fantasy Pros does like a strength of schedule that's position weighted for fantasy players. So an 8.8 out of 10 is what the Carolina Panthers wide receivers have for their strength of schedule. So they're thinking that the Panthers wide receivers are not going up against great secondaries for 2024. And then Xavier Legette just absolutely balled out in his last year of college as well. I think he had close to a 3 yards per route run, which is probably towards the top in college football. Has got a good average depth of target. He's a good downfield guy. He's great at the catch point. I think he gets pretty good separation. I think we're going to see like a DK Metcalf season out of Xavier Legette potentially, depending on the progression of Bryce Young and how he plays, which I think will be probably a little bit better given the change that they have the offensive coordinator, head coach.
The name also that fits into the realm that we're kind of talking right now. That when you said you were getting ready to mention a guy, I was expecting it to be this guy. Your boy, Ricky Pearsall, especially now with the, it's Ayuk, right? That's throwing the fit in San Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Especially with that. If something happens, which I don't expect it to, but let's just say that he's not playing for the 49ers. Ricky Pearsall's stock skyrockets to where he's a guy that if you can get him late, that could be a whale of a late round pick.
Yeah. So I was a little on the fence about Ricky Pearsall because on one hand, we've seen the tape, we've seen how good of a route runner he can be and how I think could translate really well to the NFL. But on the other hand, their offensive playmakers are absolutely loaded as long as Ayuk is on the team. I mean, you've got Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I mean, that is just kind of like a Dunze. That is just an absolutely loaded pass catching core. So I think I'm a little soured on Ricky Pearsall for fantasy purposes. Now I think he will play very well in the NFL. I just don't know if the volume is going to be there for him. And then also San Fran's defense is really good. So probably expect them to run the ball a little bit more than other teams.
Mick, you have the number one pick. PPR. Who are you taking?
Oh my God, that is a loaded question.
That's why I asked it to you.
I'm going CeeDee Lamb.
Really? I mean, it's not to me. And you know who I love. And last time I had the number one overall pick, or I guess, no, I think I had the third overall pick. I took this guy, took a risk, and I won the league because of him. And won a nice little payday. And that's CMC. Christian McCaffrey.
I wouldn't be against CMC.
He's incredible.
So the thing is, CMC is probably not my number one running back on the board this year. So my number one running back on the board is Brees Hall, which I think is he plays a lot like CMC as well, and also the Jets playmakers, they don't have nearly as robust as a group as San Fran has.
Freaking Malachi Corley.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm not big on Malachi Corley. I think he might be good in a PPR. I think he's going to get a lot of underneath routes, screens. Just like the way he was at WKU. But yeah, I think CeeDee Lamb just absolutely balled out last year. Has been just a consistent, top of the league wide receiver the past couple seasons. The defense for Dallas, it's kind of up in the air now with Dan Quinn leaving. We don't know how good it's going to be, even though Mike Zimmer is coming in. I think we saw a decline in Mike Zimmer's defenses in Minnesota towards the end of his tenure there. So how that defense performs is going to be a huge question, because on one hand, you have a very talented group, and we've seen a sustained level of success with the Mike Zimmer defense, but how much is it that Mike Zimmer is kind of aged out, or his philosophy is kind of aged out a little bit, kind of like a Vic Fangio. So, yeah.
Who is your must get this year? Somebody that you really hope, and I'm saying this to me is like round 3 to 7. Kind of that big one. And if you want to let you think about it, I can go first. It was a guy that I got late rounds last year, turned out to be, one of my, throw a dart at the wall and it stuck. Devon Achane.
That would be on my list too.
He is at the top of my list of being a guy that is legit.
Him and Isaiah Pacheco are guys that I have consistently mocked over the past couple of weeks. If I can get those two as my backfield, I'm feeling really good if that's on my fantasy roster. But yeah, Devon Achane, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's going to have a much more increased role. And then if we could get back on the subject of rookies, I think Jalen Wright is kind of in that similar vein, where I think both of those guys are probably going to be their feature backs at some point during the season. I think we're going to see Raheem Mostert probably take a step back. The guy is he's well over the age of 30 now. I think he's in the 33.
I think he's 74.
He's old. I'm surprised.
He's 32.
I'm surprised. He's 32.
He just turned 32 in April.
Yeah, probably see a step back from him, I guess. And I think that's part of the reason why they drafted Jalen Wright this year. So my must-get guy.
While you're thinking, okay, go for it. I was going to answer Justin's. Justin, we see your question. We'll come back to it here in just a moment.
So Drake London, I think, has played really well in his first 2 seasons with really bad quarterback play. Kind of like a Terry McLaurin kind of. Now they don't have similar styles of pass catching whatsoever. Drake London's more of that traditional X wide receiver, kind of like a Tee Higgins. But we've seen good production out of Drake London. He's graded really well throughout his career so far in the first couple of seasons. Over 2 yards per route ran, average depth of targets just south of 12 yards. And now he has a legitimate quarterback in Kirk Cousins. And I think that the sky's definitely the limit for Drake London to actually be a top-end fantasy wideout this season.
Justin asks this question here. I'm guessing Chase Brown will be mainly a first and second down running back, and Zach Moss will be the third down running back. Is he crazy? I think those would be more flipped. I think Zach Moss is going to get the majority of the carries, and Chase Brown will be second. But I'm going to guess if you're counting like just between those two, I think it's probably like 60-40, 65-35. I think of the split going towards Moss. But it would not shock me if Chase Brown comes out and has a great preseason and a great first couple of games that it flips. But I think early on you're going to see more of Zach Moss. But Zach Moss is a better pass blocker as well to be there on third down. I don't really think you're going to see a third down running back. I think you're going to see a lot more by committee this year. for the Bengals.
So I guess it depends on how the offensive line is going to play this year. Because if the offensive line is good, you don't need a running back there pass blocking on third downs, but you can have a Chase Brown who's more of a receiving back. But if the offensive line isn't good and you need somebody to operate in that Drew Sample type of role that Drew operated in 2023, then Zach Moss.
I just love that. Think about if we would have, even you could just say 1 year ago, that statement you just made, we would have mentioned, like what you would have thought. That, yes, acting in that running back role like Drew Sample last year.
Yeah.
And he did well. It's just more of just the absurdity of hearing that is it still makes me chuckle.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's going to be, honestly, I'd go like 55-45. I think it's going to be a pretty even carry split between the two.
How do you feel about those guys fantasy-wise?
I'm not a big fan.
And I'm kind of with you. I think, big three, or really Chase and Higgins, you can ride on, especially Chase. Gesicki is interesting. He might be guy.
I'm big on Gesicki. Like that is a
tight end.
That is a late round. Like your tight end too. If you decide to keep two tight ends, I think Gesicki is a guy I'm constantly taking in like the last round of drafts. Because of what we've seen. I know the Irv Smith year wasn't great. Oh, Donovan Clingan got picked.
Well, I'm fascinated here. Fantasy Pros has Gesicki. Do you know where they have him ranked as far as tight ends?
Like 30th?
28th, yeah. Or 29th, which seems low.
That's a good value buy right there.
Yes. Okay, here's a good question. I asked you, who are you wanting? Who are you avoiding this year? Who's somebody that you're going to stay away from? Because I have kind of a hot take when it comes to this.
Who am I staying away from?
Do you want me to drop?
Etienne.
Okay, interesting one.
Yeah,
that's a semi-hot take.
So he's played really well the past couple of seasons, but one, I don't think Jacksonville's defense is that great. So I don't know how much of a role he's going to have rushing the ball. And then I just don't think their offensive line's a good run blocking offensive line. So he's going to be he's going to have to do a lot of things on his own. So yeah, I think Travis Etienne would be my guy here.
Here's mine, and this is probably going to be something. This is going to be one of those that freezing cold takes. Go ahead, record this because you might be able to throw this back at me in a year, and I'll look like an idiot. Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I don't feel that way. I'm pretty high on Derrick Henry this year.
I'm waiting for him to. You mentioned the age of Mostert, and I mean Derrick Henry is not a spring chicken by any stretch, and the way he plays, I mean he's 30, and he has had a lot of wear and tear on him as well. I'm just fascinated as to when the drop off comes. And why I'm also counting him is I think he is going to be overdrafted in a lot of ways because he is going into a run-first offense. I feel like people are going to think that he's going to be great because of that, whereas he would not be a guy I would draft in the first 2 rounds. But I can see people getting him in the first 2 rounds for that exact reason. And that's why I'm kind of straying away from Derrick Henry this year, just because I'm waiting for him to fall off. And I mean, personally, I hope that it's this year because that would mean good things for the Bengals. And Justin's point is interesting. AFC North is going to beat Henry down. We know it's not the Bengals defensive line, but I'll be interested. But he still is going to have to go up against the Steelers or the Browns defensive lines, who are both really good twice a year.
Yeah.
And there aren't defensive lines like that in the AFC South. Not even close.
Another name I don't like, DeAndre Swift. Going to the Bears backfield. DeAndre Swift is not graded that well throughout his career, 72 grade. I think last year has not graded well as a receiver. Yards after contact are pretty bad. It doesn't have the greatest offensive line, but it's not terrible. And then also their defense is bad. They're not going to be running the ball very, very much at all. I think we're going to see an air raid Bears offense in 2024. But yeah, DeAndre Swift is another name that I would not touch in this draft.
I know and I think I'm correct in saying this, that we have a little bit of different philosophies when it comes to quarterbacks, when it comes to fantasy. You are, and correct me if I'm wrong, you are probably not as high on the quarterback position as others are. Is that a safe point
it
to make?
depends on who's available when. I wouldn't be averse to drafting a quarterback early, but I like getting I like having both of my running backs within my first 4 rounds. Depending on if it's a 12-man league, I want them in the first 3 rounds because I think there's always a huge drop off from, tier 1 and tier 2 to tier 3 and tier 4.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Is it's just, and that's what I love about fantasy football, is because there are so many different philosophies, and in a lot of ways, there are not a lot of wrong ones, because everyone has success in their own ways. Because me, my fantasy philosophy, and this is getting a little bit off topic from where I was going, is that where we are very, very different is that I very rarely make a trade, very rarely. You are a trading fiend. I very rarely make moves throughout the week. When I have my team, I'll do tweaks, but I'm not a big wheeler and dealer. You, though, I know there are years where some people might even call you names because you.
Well, no, that's just waiver wire. I'm waiver wire guy.
Yes, you are waiver wire guy.
Yeah, not necessarily trades, but waiver wire is definitely. I'm a fiend. I've been a fiend for that. So yeah, quarterbacks. I'm never really draft. I always seem to be drafting one really late because everybody just hops on all the really good ones way too early. Who are you looking at quarterback wise?
So to me, quarterback 1 is always a very interesting thing, because in my idea is there are about 3 to 5 that are kind of in that upper tier. And if you don't get one of those guys, I kind of jump into yours where I can take one of the bottom feeders. Because I think you got a couple of dudes at the top. Mahomes, he's a great fantasy quarterback. Josh Allen, great fantasy quarterback. Lamar, Jalen Hurts. Those are really good fantasy football quarterbacks because you've got some legs action in there. They pass a lot and so on. But after that, you get a huge drop-off. As not a huge one, but as far as my philosophy when it comes to drafting them, because I'm not sure how much of a difference there is between Dak Prescott and Trevor Lawrence. I guess, and you can take whatever names you want to do in that. And so that's where I'm very interested. But there is a huge difference between, Trevor Lawrence and Josh Allen.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of my philosophy when it comes to quarterbacks.
For sure. No, that makes plenty of sense. And then I think there's also some late round gems at quarterback too. I think Matthew Stafford is like my darling late round quarterback draft choice, which he had a career year, I think, last year with a young wide receiver core and was able to work some magic, especially late in the season. Now his rushing isn't anything it's really not much at all. So he's not a running quarterback. So his production fantasy wise is a little hampered by that. But what he's been able to do, throwing the ball in the supporting cast and the play callers that he has on his sideline, I think that he's going to be a good late round target. I think I'm really high on Dak too. Dak is, I think he had.
I have had the worst luck. Dak has been like my quarterback curse. Anytime I draft him, he's hurt. So he's like the one guy. Everyone has that guy, that they just can't draft, because every year they feel like he's cursed. Dak is my curse.
Yeah. I definitely see where you're coming from there. So yeah, I think Dak just had a really good year last year with his wide receiver core with Brandon Cooks coming in. So I think that I'm pretty high on him this year. Jordan Love, Brock Purdy. I mean, those are really good fantasy quarterbacks, I think, especially if you get them later.
Where are you throwing Rocky Lombardi into this tier?
QB1.
Okay. Yeah. Like up there with Mahomes?
Oh, yeah.
Or Drew Plitt?
He's going to set the league on fire this year.
I do believe Drew Plitt played in the UFL championship game. I think he was one of the quarterbacks in the championship game.
Did he really? Was he with
Bengals legend Drew Plitt?
Nice.
I think that's right. Either that or I just completely made that up, which wouldn't be the first time on this podcast. Well, apparently, I think I might have just made that up. Well, he was on the Battlehawks, but I thought that was AJ McCarron that there was their quarterback. So I guess I just made that up, Nick. It's okay.
I'm looking it up. Don't you worry.
Maybe it wasn't Drew Plitt. It was one of the. What was the other guy's name? No, I got to look here. This is just great podcasting, naming random.
What was the champion? Was this the Stallions and the Brahmas?
Okay. It wasn't Kevin Hogan. That's a name from the past, though. Remember him?
Browns
Nope. I don't know who I was thinking of. Maybe okay. I might have just completely made that up. Michigan Panthers. Nope. I don't know. I'm just completely.
So fake news. Was the championship the Stallions versus Brahmas game, or am I missing?
It was. Yes, it was.
Chase Garbers for the Brahmas and Adrian Martinez.
Shout out to Nebraska.
Did he go to Nebraska?
Adrian Martinez? Oh, yeah. He was there for like 35 years at Nebraska.
No. Is he related to Tino?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so. But I think as a whole, fantasy football, it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out as far as Bengals. I mean, I think you're looking at the 3 wide receivers. I think, Burton, Chase, Higgins are all good picks when it comes to fantasy. Burrow is an interesting one. He's not a great fantasy quarterback, but he's not a bad fantasy quarterback. He's kind of, to me, in that mid-tier. He's maybe mid-upper tier. But then a guy, too, that we haven't even brought up that's a pretty solid fantasy player. Money Mac, Evan McPherson. He's pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk kickers. I just stream. I stream matchups with kickers, so I'm not really
we don't want to talk about Younghoe Koo?
He provided some value for me whenever he was available.
Harrison Butker? You got any thoughts on Harrison Butker?
Not probably. I think my wife would not be happy if I drafted Harrison Butker.
Rob Dillingham just went to the Spurs. Hell yeah!
Oh hey, the Grizzlies are on the clock. Is Dalton Connect off the board?
He is not.
I heard it might be Edie. I heard it's either Edie or Connect here. They're about to pick.
Yeah, I see.
You got Nosferatu is announcing the pick.
I was really hoping that Reed Shepherd would go with
Zach Edey.
Really? Edie went
Zach
ninth.
Edey.
Wow. I was really hoping Reed Shepherd and Rob Dillingham would both go to the Spurs.
So they can play with Keldon Johnson.
Well, and Wemby. I mean, listen.
And Wemby.
Next week on the show, we are more than likely going to be doing the show on Monday of next week. We have got, let's see here. Mark asks, who are your NBA teams given that the Royals are long gone? Mick?
Grizzlies.
I do not have an NBA team, Mark. Not an NBA guy.
Morant.
I'm a college basketball fan. I think college basketball is a better product. There's my take. It's a more entertaining product to me. I can't get into the NBA. Part of it is I don't have a team, and I feel like if I had a team, I'd care a little bit more about it, but I just don't. Now, if Louisville gets an NBA team, I'm all in. Are you going to switch to the Louisville team if they get one? No?
I'm more of a player guy than a team guy, so I'm a Grizzlies fan. But if Ja were to leave, I probably would just be a fan of the...
Do you also like to go live on Instagram with your pistol?
Yeah, every day. Every day I do. America.
But no, I don't remember what. Oh, yeah. Next week, though, we're going to have a really cool show, hopefully planned. If not, we've got one in the coming weeks. We're going to have a little game show of sorts, a quiz show that I'm really excited about putting together. And, Mick, you are going to win, right?
Yeah. I think I'll do pretty good.
Yeah, I'm interested because I know some of the questions already, and it'll be kind of fun to see how it goes about. So that'll be next week, hopefully on Monday. If not, stay tuned to our social media channels. We'll be on there. You can follow us on your favorite podcasting platform as well, and re-listen to all of the shows that way. Mick, any final thoughts, Bengals or fantasy football in general?
No. Have a good week, guys. Have a good weekend.
Yep, we'll see you back here next week for the next edition of the Jungle Juice podcast. He's Mick Nelson. I'm Sam Gormley. Hoo day.
Hoo day. Thanks for watching.